When my son told me the nursing home had a bed ready for me next week, I smiled and thanked him like the accommodating father I'd always been. 3 days later, I was sitting across from a private investigator, about to discover that my golden boy had been planning my exit for longer than I'd imagined. Thomas was about to learn that underestimating your father is a dangerous game. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're from. Let me walk you through how I went from a man being pushed into assisted living to the one holding all the leverage. Because, friends, this story has more layers than you'd believe. 6 weeks ago, I was Daniel Morrison, 72 years old, widower of 4 years, and father to one spectacularly greedy son. When my wife, Patricia, passed from cancer, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. Thomas had been attentive during her illness, visiting weekly, helping with medical decisions, being the son every parent hopes for. I should have questioned why his concern didn't fade after the funeral. Instead, I was grateful for his continued presence in my life, not realizing he was conducting an inventory. The hints started small. Thomas would visit and casually mention how big the house felt with just me rattling around in it. He'd point out the lawn maintenance I was falling behind on, the gutters that needed cleaning, the projects that were becoming too much for a man my age. "Dad, you've worked hard your whole life," he'd say with perfect concern in his voice. "You deserve to relax and let someone else handle all this responsibility." What he meant was, you deserve to get out of this valuable property so I can cash in. Things escalated after I had a minor fall in the garden. Nothing serious, just tripped over a hose and bruised my hip, but Thomas acted like I'd had a catastrophic accident. He brought his wife Jennifer over that same evening, both of them wearing matching expressions of grave concern. "Dad, this is exactly what we've been worried about," Thomas said, settling into my recliner like he already owned it. "What if you'd hit your head? What if no one had found you for hours?" Jennifer nodded along, adding her own rehearsed lines about safety and responsibility and quality of life. That's when they presented the brochure. Sunset Gardens Assisted Living Community, glossy photos of smiling seniors playing cards and doing watercolor paintings. Private rooms, 24-hour nursing care, planned activities, and a community of people your own age. Thomas flipped through the pages like a salesman closing a deal. "We've already toured the facility, Dad. It's top-notch. And there's a room available next month. You wouldn't have to worry about anything ever again." I looked at the price list tacked in the back of the brochure. $7,000 per month for basic care, more for the level of assistance Thomas was suggesting I needed. That's $84,000 a year to warehouse me in a place that smelled like disinfectant and defeat. But what choice do I have? I asked, playing the confused old man they expected me to be. Thomas exchanged a glance with Jennifer, the kind of look that said their plan was proceeding perfectly. "Well, Dad, that's something we need to discuss. You need to sell the house to cover the cost. We've already contacted a realtor who thinks we could get at least $900,000, maybe more. $900,000 for the house Patricia and I bought 40 years ago for $60,000. The house where we raised Thomas, where we celebrated holidays, where Patricia spent her final days. Thomas wanted to sell it to pay for locking me away in an institution I didn't need. Of course, he'd be happy to handle all the complicated paperwork, manage the sale, set up the payments to the facility. All I had to do was sign some documents and let him take care of everything. How generous of him. I told them I needed time to think about it, which clearly frustrated Thomas. "Dad, the room won't stay available forever. Other families are looking at Sunset Gardens too. You need to make a decision." But I held firm, and eventually they left, taking their brochure and their barely concealed impatience with them. After they drove away, I sat in the living room Patricia and I had furnished together and really thought about what had just happened. My son wanted me in assisted living, wanted to sell my home, wanted control of my assets, but why the urgency? Why the pressure? That question kept me up most of the night. By morning, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I called my old friend Marcus, a retired police detective who'd helped me with a business situation years ago. "Marcus, I need someone who can find out what people don't want found. He gave me a name, Rebecca Walsh, private investigator specializing in financial crimes and family fraud. I met her at a coffee shop downtown, feeling slightly ridiculous about suspecting my own son of something sinister. But Rebecca listened to my story without judgment. Taking notes and asking pointed questions. Mr. Morrison, she said when I finished, your instincts are probably right. Adult children don't usually push this hard for assisted living unless there's a financial motive. With your permission, I'd like to look into your son's finances, his recent activities, and whether he's been accessing any of your accounts or documents. I gave her permission for everything. If Thomas was planning something, I wanted to know before I signed anything that gave him control over my life. Rebecca called me 4 days later. Mr. Morrison, we need to meet in person. I have information you're going to want to see. We met at her office, where she had a file folder thick with printouts, photographs, and financial documents. Your son has been very busy, she said, spreading papers across her desk. He's deeply in debt, personal and business. He owes $230,000 across credit cards, a business loan that's in default, and he's 3 months behind on his mortgage. His investment firm is failing, and he needs a significant cash infusion within 60 days or he'll lose everything. I stared at the documents showing my son's financial collapse. Thomas had always presented himself as successful, driving expensive cars, taking luxury vacations, buying Jennifer designer everything. It was all a facade funded by debt. And now he needs my money to save himself. Exactly, but there's more. Rebecca pulled out another set of documents. Your son has been attempting to access your bank accounts using old power of attorney documents from when your wife was ill. The bank flagged it as suspicious and denied the requests, but he tried 3 times. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Thomas hadn't just been planning to push me into assisted living. He'd been actively trying to steal from me. Rebecca continued, he's also been in contact with an estate attorney about having you declared mentally incompetent. If he succeeded, he could become your legal guardian and gain control of all your assets without your consent. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. My own son was trying to have me declared incompetent so he could rob me legally. What are my options? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. You could confront him, but he'd likely deny everything and possibly accelerate his plans. Or you could beat him at his own game. Set a trap, document his intentions, and ensure he faces consequences for what he's attempting. I thought about Patricia, about how she'd want me to handle this. She'd always believed in justice, in people facing the results of their choices. Rebecca, I want to set a trap. Tell me what to do. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would. Pretend to agree to Thomas's assisted living plan, seem confused and compliant, and let him think he was succeeding. Meanwhile, Rebecca would document everything, record conversations with my permission, and build a case that could be used legally if needed. I went home and called Thomas that evening. Son, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you're right about sunset gardens. I heard the excitement in his voice, barely contained. Dad, that's great. That's really great. I'll come over tomorrow and we can start the paperwork. Thomas arrived the next morning with a briefcase full of documents, power of attorney forms, property transfer papers, financial authorization documents, everything needed to give him complete control. He spread them across my kitchen table with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this moment carefully. This seems like a lot of paperwork, I said, channeling confusion. It's standard stuff, Dad. Just signatures authorizing me to handle the house sale and set up your care arrangements. Nothing to worry about. But I was wearing a wire, a small recording device Rebecca had provided, capturing every word. Thomas, what happens to the money? From the house after the assisted living costs are covered. He hesitated just slightly. Well, any remaining funds will be managed responsibly. We'd invest them for your future needs. We meaning you would control them. Dad, I'm trying to help you. You don't understand these financial complexities. Actually, son, I understand perfectly. That's when I pulled out the folder Rebecca had prepared. containing copies of all his debt documents, the attempted account access, the communications with the estate attorney. I understand that you're broke. I understand that you've been trying to steal from me. And I understand that you plan to lock me away in assisted living so you could liquidate my assets to save your failing business. Thomas's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, calculation, before settling on desperate. Dad, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. The business, the debts, I was desperate. So you decided to rob your father. It wasn't robbery, it was borrowing. I was going to pay you back once things turned around. With what money, Thomas? You're drowning in debt. You don't have a plan. You have a crime. He stood up abruptly. Dad, if you don't sign these papers, I'll proceed with the incompetency hearing. I have a doctor who'll testify that you're not capable of managing your affairs. I smiled at him then, really smiled. Son, do I seem incompetent to you right now? Because everything you've said today has been recorded. The threats, the coercion, the attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. That's elder abuse, and it's a felony. Thomas grabbed for the documents on the table, but I'd already moved them out of reach. My attorney has copies of everything. So does the private investigator who documented your attempted theft. And so do the police who are very interested in your activities. You wouldn't report your own son. Watch me. Thomas, you chose greed over family. You plan to steal my home, my independence, my dignity, all to save yourself from consequences of your own poor choices. You don't get to play the victim now. He left angry, slamming doors and shouting threats about lawyers and lawsuits. But I felt calmer than I had in weeks. The trap was set, the evidence was documented, and my son was about to learn an expensive lesson about underestimating his father. The next week, I met with my attorney, Catherine Brooks, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in elder law. She reviewed all the evidence Rebecca had gathered, listened to the recordings, and examined the fraudulent documents Thomas had prepared. Mr. Morrison, you have an exceptionally strong case. What your son attempted constitutes multiple felonies: attempted theft, coercion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We can pursue criminal charges, or we can use this leverage to protect your interests. What do you recommend? Catherine smiled. I recommend we give your son a choice. He can face criminal prosecution and potentially prison time, or he can agree to a permanent legal arrangement that protects you and ensures he never tries this again. The arrangement Catherine proposed was brilliant. Thomas would sign documents permanently relinquishing any claim to my estate, would agree to stay at least 50 miles away from me unless I initiated contact, and would enter mandatory financial counseling and therapy. In exchange, I wouldn't press criminal charges. It was more mercy than he deserved, but Patricia wouldn't have wanted me to send our son to prison if there was another option. Catherine scheduled a meeting at her office with Thomas and his attorney. A nervous young man who clearly understood his client's situation was dire. When Thomas arrived, he looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. His attorney had obviously explained the severity of the charges he was facing. Mr. Morrison, Thomas's attorney began, my client would like to apologize for his recent actions and discuss a resolution. Catherine placed the agreement on the table. Your client can sign this, giving up any future claims to Mr. Morrison's estate and agreeing to the stated conditions, or we file criminal charges this afternoon. You have 10 minutes to decide. I watched Thomas read through the document, seeing his face change as he understood what he was giving up. This means I get nothing. You were planning to leave me nothing anyway, I reminded him. This just ensures you can't try again in the future. But Dad, I'm your son. Your only child. You're an adult who made adult choices. Now you face adult consequences. Thomas signed the documents with shaking hands, his attorney witnessing each signature. When it was done, Catherine collected everything and placed it in her file. Mr. Morrison now has legal protection from any future claims or harassment. If you violate these terms, criminal charges will be filed immediately. After they left, I sat in Catherine's office feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Is this really how it had to end? I asked her. Mr. Morrison, you gave your son an option many parents wouldn't. He chose his path. You simply chose not to be his victim. Over the following months, I rebuilt my life on my own terms. The house stayed mine, my finances stayed under my control, and my independence remained intact. I hired help for the heavy yard work, not because I couldn't do it, but because I chose not to. I traveled to places Patricia and I had always planned to visit. I took classes at the community college. I lived. Thomas tried calling twice in the first month, both times asking for money. I didn't answer. Jennifer sent a letter explaining they were losing the house, asking if I could help just this once. I sent back a copy of the agreement her husband had signed. They filed for bankruptcy 4 months after our confrontation. The business closed, the cars were repossessed. They moved into a small rental across town. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances who seemed to expect I'd feel guilty. IDN, single quotes T. One afternoon, almost a year after everything happened. I was having coffee with Marcus, telling him about my recent trip to Scotland. You know, he said, most parents would have helped their kid out eventually. Most parents didn't have their kids try to rob them. I replied, Marcus, Thomas had multiple opportunities to ask me for help honestly. Instead, he chose manipulation and crime. That's not a mistake. That's character. But do you ever miss having him in your life? I considered the question carefully. I miss the son I thought I had. But that person was an illusion? The real Thomas showed me who he was when he thought I was weak and vulnerable. People don't usually come back from that dot. My days now are filled with activities I choose. People I enjoy and freedom I earned by refusing to be a victim. The house is mine, decorated how I like it, organized around my schedule. I'm taking painting classes, something Patricia always encouraged me to try. I volunteer at a senior legal aid clinic, helping other elderly people protect themselves from financial exploitation. The work is surprisingly fulfilling, using my experience to prevent others from facing what I faced. Last month, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dad. It was Thomas's voice, quiet and hesitant. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For all of it. I was quiet, letting him fill the silence. I've been in therapy, working through a lot of issues. I understand now how wrong I was. How badly I hurt you. That's good, Thomas. I'm glad you're getting help. Do you think we could meet sometime? Maybe have coffee and talk. I thought about it, really thought about it. Thomas, I appreciate your apology. But I don't think meeting is a good idea right now. Maybe someday, but not today. There was a long pause. I understand. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Take care of yourself, son. You too, Dad. After hanging up, I felt surprisingly at peace. The anger that had burned so hot in those early months had faded to something more like acceptance. Thomas had made his choices, faced his consequences, and now we both lived with the results. That's not tragedy. That's just life. I've learned some important lessons through all of this. People will show you who they really are when they think you're powerless. Family doesn't mean you accept abuse or excuse betrayal. And most importantly, you're never too old to stand up for yourself, to demand respect, to refuse victimhood. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them face the full consequences of their actions. Not out of cruelty, but out of respect for their agency and capacity to learn. These days, when I sit on my porch in the evening, watching the sun set over the garden Patricia and I planted together, I feel content. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because I refused to let someone else write the ending to my story. My son wanted to reduce me to a confused old man who needed to be managed and controlled. Instead, I showed him exactly how sharp and capable I still am. That's not revenge. That's self-respect. The house will eventually be donated to a charity that helps elderly people fight financial exploitation, something I've had written into my new will. Thomas will inherit nothing, not out of spite, but because he already showed me what he'd do with an inheritance. He'd waste it trying to maintain an illusion of success he never earned. Better that the money helps people who actually need protection from predators like my son used to be. Sometimes I wonder what Patricia would think of how I handled everything. I believe she'd be proud. Not proud that our son turned out to be a criminal, but proud that I didn't let him turn me into a victim. She always said I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. Turned out she was right. So if you're watching this and you're facing a similar situation, someone in your family trying to take advantage, trying to push you aside, trying to control your life because they think you're too old or too weak to fight back, remember this story. Remember that age doesn't equal helplessness. Remember that you have options, legal protections, and resources. And remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them face the reality of their choices. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters, and you're stronger than anyone who underestimates you realizes.